What's up, guys? MC Stu here, and today we are going to take a look at the Eisenberg. I finally got it actually late last night, finishing up the event here, and have started to put together some builds on it and have settled on one in particular that I'm really enjoying. It's going to be more of a DPS focused build. This ship is capable of tanking as well. Tanking takes some traits that are going to be C-Store, and this video is going to be completely free to play build. So just my quick reaction to the ship itself. I am not a huge fan of some of these future discovery style ships. It's not terrible, but I mean it's just not what I'm used to. I don't know that I'll ever be used to that or not, but with that being said, it is a free tier 6 ship, and I am happy to have it here, especially on my free to play account. So let's go ahead and jump into the build. Before we do that, let me just take this opportunity again to thank everybody for your support on the channel. Everyone that has subscribed, comments, and gives the videos thumbs up, I really appreciate that. 2021 has been an awesome year, and I'm looking forward to 2022. So thank you guys. I really do appreciate that. Let's go ahead and jump into the build here and see what we're working with. So what I decided to go with is going to be a phaser build. I wanted to stay somewhat quote-unquote canon with this and not veer off into any other energy types. Phaser is also on the budget level, especially in free level, one of the easiest to build towards. There's a few mission drops, quite a bit of rep gear that boost phaser, and that is nice. So that's definitely the way to go if you're just starting the game, or if you're just free to play and you're kind of trying to make up your mind which direction you want to go. Phaser is definitely going to be the best way to start with. What we did here is I went with a beam overload build. With beams, you can go fire at will. It's very theatrical and it looks great, but it just, especially advanced content, it tends to attract a little too much attention. So I did play with it a little bit, and we could make it work, but really something like that's going to be more reserved for a tank build where you're trying to grab threat, and again, that's going to be difficult to do without some premium traits from the C-Store. So let's go ahead and start with the gear, and then we'll look at the rest of it. So the first thing I used here is going to be the prolonged engagement phaser beam array. This comes from the Phoenix prize packs. I have a video last week that goes over all the different rewards, but if you come into here, and right now you can get a free one. I have a video on how to get that as well. I'll put both of those down in the description for you guys. But there's an event currently running where you can get the one free a day, and what it does is it unlocks vouchers. I don't know if I have any sitting on this character at the moment. I don't, but with the voucher, you will get a box like this. This is what they will give you for free, and what you'll do is you'll come in and open it, and let's go ahead and do that. So I got a green uncommon, and with this, you would open this, and if you got a very rare, you could get the prolonged engagement. Through this whole event, chances are you will get at least one of those. They drop pretty often. If not, you can buy them for dilithium, so I definitely recommend doing that. On the last video that I'd put out going over this whole store, I had stated that all of this stuff is per character, and that is true except for these here. I went and tested it, and if you unlock one of these, it is going to give you an account unlock for both of them. And I think that's some sort of bug due to, a lot of this stuff was in an event before, so I'm not sure why that's the case. But if you look at it in your reclaim, let's go to reclaim. It's going to be here. You're going to see it listed here with these weekend tokens. Mine is listed like this because I got these from the event. I did not have to buy them from the store. But yours will also be listed like that as well. I think you can also reclaim those. I think they'll show up for you here. Let's see, space gear. Yeah. So they'll show up in here as well for you. So that is where you are going to get that weapon. The reason we are using that is it has a proc to give you extra fire cycle haste, and it does very well. The cannon variant I use on this on my main account on in-game, high-end builds. It's a very, very good weapon. I recommend picking that up. It comes in ultra rare too as well. So For the next phaser and the two on the back here, I used Agony phasers, which we got from the event a few months back that gave us the Mir Gagarin. You do not have to use these. There's not a huge difference between, you know, the different variants of the energy types. I just didn't want to go out and upgrade and craft standard ones. So these ones do have a proc where they can leave a lasting phaser damage over time, which is nice. If you have these from the event, I definitely recommend using them. These are probably my favorite beam arrays because they do that damage over time. Although if you don't have these, you're not going to notice a huge difference from that. So use what you have, just make sure it matches and that it is phaser. Next, we have the this is from the Discovery rep, and this is the wide angle dual heavy beam bank. I'm using it in conjunction with the dark matter torpedo. So we're getting the two-piece set from this. Both of these items are good on their own. And the two-piece set is going to give us a stacking boost to our critical severity. So every time we get a critical hit, we're going to get one critical severity, and that can stack up to 25 times. So after you're in combat for a certain amount of time, you will have an extra 25% critical severity, which is a huge, huge boost. Definitely worth running. I probably would, if you are at tier 5 on your Discovery rep, I would probably drop the dual beam bank for the Lorca console and drop one of your tactical out, or if you have it X upgraded, use it in the X upgrade slot. The console is excellent. It's very, very good, and you'll get the two-piece from that, and then I would run another beam array here. So I wanted to keep all of the rep gear I'm using for the most part at tier 2 or under, just so newer players could easily access this stuff and work towards, you know, building the ship and upgrading everything. So if you do have the Discovery rep up to tier 5, I would drop this and put another beam array in and pick up the Lorca console and use that instead for the two-piece. You're going to get more out of that. Okay, so next we have the Elite Fleet Deflector, and this is here for the critical chance and critical severity buff that we get from it. Next, we are using the two-piece Bajor defense set. This comes from a mission in the New Frontiers arc. You'll have to run it twice, and we're using this two-piece for the two-piece set, which is giving us a boost to our phaser damage output. This two-piece can also be used on Disruptor and Plasma as well. So if you're working on something like that, this set will work for that as well. Next, I'm using a crafted warp core. So this is a deuterium stabilized warp core, and this is here for the negative 15% weapons power cost. We're using beam overload, so anything that we can do to reduce that power cost is going to help this build out quite a bit. All right, moving to the two on the back that we have not covered yet, we are using the Quantum Phase Beam Array. This comes from the mission Sunrise. It's a decent weapon for free. We're using it in conjunction with the two-piece. So we're using the Universal Console that also comes from that same mission. The Universal Console is here mainly for the phaser damage that we're getting out of it, as well as the extra auxiliary power. We'll get to that in a minute. The two-piece on this is going to give us an extra 15 plus 15 accuracy skill rating, and it's also going to give us a higher potential on the proc for the torpedo. And does it also give it for, yeah, so it also gives it for the beam array as well. The proc on the beam array, and there is a torpedo for this set as well. I'm not using it because the dark matter is better. Essentially strips away shields, so it's kind of a drain proc that has. This is an excellent weapon for free. The console is a good console to use regardless, so you do not need to tie these together if you wanted to go all agony, because this does have a blue look, and if you wanted to keep it somewhat matching, you could drop this weapon and you wouldn't lose a lot from not having the beam array. But I definitely would be using this console regardless. The boost we're getting for phaser and not having to take up a tactical slot allows us to stack up more base phaser damage on this build. All right, jumping over to the last weapon here, we're using the Trilithium Enhanced Omnidirectional Beam. This is here for the extra fire cycle haste is what its proc is, and obviously it's phaser. It also matches the other phasers with the exception of the dual beam bank, and we are using this with its two-piece as well. which is the reinforced armaments. This is a pretty decent survivability console, so it's giving us some extra starship hull restoration, and it's giving us some extra max capacity on the hull as well. The two-piece for this is giving us a boost to our fire cycle haste, and this is for all the weapons on the ship. We're also getting some additional flight speed, which is always nice as well. So when you use beam overload, you're going to use extra power, and it's also going to fire slower. So anything that we can do building around beam overload to reduce power cost on the weapons and increase the fire cycle haste or speed that your weapons are firing is going to make beam overload, when it's active, do much better than it otherwise would. And it otherwise does pretty darn good also, but if you can boost that up to fire faster, you're going to get a lot more out of that. All right, let's go ahead and jump down into our consoles. Well, let's talk devices first. So we're using the battery energy amplifiers. This is giving us plus 20% bonus all energy weapon damage. This is good for beams and cannons. Next, we're using deuterium surplus. This is for the clicky to give extra speed boost. I'm using the Kobayashi Maru. This came from an event. If you don't have this, this isn't going to make any kind of a massive difference to you, but it gives you a little bit of buffs. When you click on it, it calls it in, and it sends out buffs to all of your team. Again, not the end of the world if you don't have it. Next, we are using the subspace field modulator, and that is for the extra resistance rating if you start getting into a pinch. Okay, down to the engineering consoles. So we already covered the two here, first and third. So the second one is going to be the House Martok defense configuration. This comes from the mission Brushfire, and this is here as a survivability console. It also gives us some additional flight turn speed, so we're getting some movement buff out of this, and it's giving us a pretty nice boost to our hit points, our shields, our engine's power, and our maximum shield capacity. This is a nice console. If this was a disruptor build, there's an Omni that goes with this that gives a nice two-piece as well. So if you're working on disruptor, definitely keep that in mind with the House Martok set. All right, lastly for engineering, we are using the Trillium D. This is a survivability console. This is giving us a nice boost to our resistance ratings. It's also giving us additional starship hull capacity. It's giving us additional shield capacity, and it is giving us additional auxiliary. The reason the auxiliary is somewhat important on this build, we're not using any Lobi consoles or anything like that. So this first one here in the science slot, which is our temporal entanglement suite, this is here for the critical chance and critical severity boost. This is going to scale off of our auxiliary power. So the higher that is, the more you're going to get in terms of that critical chance and critical severity. Now, for me, and the way that I build most of my ships is I'm max into weapons power. You always have to have that. And then next, I like to have speed. So I generally put my residual power all into engines. Now, if you don't like to fly like that, you're going to have more flexibility to put maybe more into your auxiliary. I do not like that. And so any kind of boost that I get from any of these consoles, which is what this green part is going to give me more that is going to benefit this console to get that critical chance and critical severity. So even with having this almost all the way down, I'm still more than halfway on this power slider, and we're getting a decent amount, enough to slot this console here. This console comes from one of the Iconian missions, and let's just find that so we know where that's at. I believe it is Butterfly. Let's look here. Butterfly. Yes, Butterfly. So this is actually part of a Tetrion weapon set that you can get. If you're doing a Tetrion build, definitely check out that mission, but that is where that console comes from. All right, let's go ahead and get into the rep gear. So we're using the 0-point module. This comes from the first tier of the Romulan rep. Extremely cheap and easy to get. You could get this within a couple days of using your rep system and progressing through that. Even as a new player, once you unlock it, if you have the marks within 2 days or so, you would be able to grab this console. And this is here for a couple different reasons. So the extra power to all subsystems is great. That's helping our speed, our shields, our weapons power, and our auxiliary. This is also giving us a pretty nice boost to our critical chance at 2.4% when you have it fully maxed out on the upgrade. So this is a nice console. It's very easy to get from the rep. Next, we have the Ordnance Accelerator. This is from the Gamma Rep. This also comes from, I believe, Tier 1. It might be Tier 2 on that. This is a really versatile console. You can use this on a lot of different builds. So some of this it's going to help, some of it's not. So if this was a mine build, I would have this on here for the mine recharge speed, the mine damage. If this was a torpedo build, we do have a torpedo, so we're going to get some benefit from that at the 23.8% projectile damage boost. But the main reason it is on here is for the phaser directed energy weapons damage, the 23.8, which is great. You could also use this on a Polaron build. So this is a nice console to get. You can use it on a lot of different flavors of ships and builds. And again, that comes from the Gamma Rep. All right, next we have the assimilated module. This comes from the Omega Rep. You can get this on Tier 1. Again, very easy to get, and this is here mainly for the critical chance and critical severity, but this is also giving us a good size boost to our weapons power. It does have some drain and control. Drain, not really a big deal. Even if you were doing, say, a budget psi build, 30% is a pretty nice boost there to the control expertise, and it's always nice, even on a psi build, to have that extra critical chance and critical severity. Lastly, in our tactical slots, we have vulnerability locators. So these are giving us critical chance, fully upgraded. Well, I guess they're not epic, so they could be a little bit more. We're getting 1.9, so almost 2 critical chance, and we're getting 37.5 phaser damage from each of these, and we're running 3 of those. These come from the Fleet Spire. Depending on if they have the discount going, they run, I think they're, 8.5 thousand dilithium and 50,000 fleet marks per. So fairly easy to grind out. These will take a little bit more time, but it really depends on how active your fleet is and what kind of projects they have up, and how many fleet marks you got. But I tend to find fleet marks come pretty easy, especially if you're running the TFOs. And so as long as your fleet's active with their projects, you would be able to pump this out very, very quickly. I mean, within a night of playing. All right, so that covers the build. Let's just take a look at the stats, how we look here sitting in space. So our hull in this ship is pretty decent. Transfer power rate is very good. Critical chance and critical severity isn't terrible for a completely free build. Sitting at almost 40% and almost 150 is very, very decent. Our resistance ratings are very, very good here. You could take this into pretty much any kind of advanced content, no problem, and have just a great time. The survivability's there, and as you'll see in the run that we do, the damage output is there. I did run it through a couple ISAs. That's not what I'm going to show here on the video, but I ran it through a couple, and I was getting in between 80 and 100k DPS, which is excellent for, again, a $0 build, all mission drop, fleet, and rep gear. All right, let's go ahead and look at the skill tree. This is my kind of do-it-all skill tree on my free-to-play. So, I mean, you can copy it if you like. If I were to re-roll this, I would probably make it look different. I have some videos that were posted recently on a number of different kinds of skill trees depending on your play style. So I encourage you to check those out if you have questions on that. We are running the specialization of strategist and intel, and I recommend for anyone that's new or not doing something special like, a hardcore psi build or torpedo build or psi build, you're going to want to do your strat and your intel first, get those filled out. If you're newer to the game, these are the 2 you need to do. Do those 2 first, and then you can start exploring, because if you're new to the game, you're not going to be doing any of those aforementioned roles. It's just way beyond what, not even your understanding, but your ability to get the resources you need, in order to put something together like that. So definitely start with those 2. All right, let's take a look at traits. So we stayed with all free traits. So the ones that have a little extra kind of background, they all kind of look similar. These come from your R&D when you reach level 15, which can be done in about a month or so. There's some boosts and ways to get that done quicker through your fleet. Again, check out the fleet video that I have. It'll go over some of those things that you can do, or the R&D video in particular will tell you exactly how to get these. But basically, in any of the different R&D schools, progressing to level 15 15 will unlock personal space trait. So we're using Beam Barrage for the plus 2% all damage bonus for 30 seconds. This stacks up to 3 times. And this is what activates this. King activating beam skill. So when we activate beam overload, that's going to give us this boost here. And this does refresh every 30 seconds. Beam overload, even with Photonic Officer 1 for your cooldown, is going to be up much more often than just every 30 seconds. So this will stack up fully after activating beam overload 3 times and should carry on as long as you're in combat and activating that. Next, we're using beam training. This gives us a plus 5% bonus all weapons damage. Next, we are using kinetic precision, and this is giving us a plus 10% to projectile shield penetration. So this is helping the dark matter torpedo up front, as well as this one here with our projectile training for the plus 5% bonus damage for projectiles. Next, we are using the particle manipulator, and this is a really, really good one, especially for science builds. On this build, this isn't doing much at all, other than for the 1 science damage ability I have, which we'll get to in a moment. But it basically is going to give us plus 20% critical hit chance and plus 10% critical severity on any of our science exotic damage abilities. For a Psi build, this is a must-have. This is huge. Even on a high-end end-game build, you're going to see this trait sitting on there because it works very well, and you can get even better stats out of this because this is going to scale with your skills, your skill level in your skill tree, and anything else that's adding to that. Which a Psi build is going to have consoles that are adding to your science skills, and you're going to get even better stats out of this particular personal trait. All right, moving along, we are using Innocuous, and this is here for the plus 5% critical severity and negative 25 threat generation. So that's helpful. On top of the resistance and the hit points that we have, reducing threat on top of that is just going to make you even more survivable. Next, we have Fleet Coordinator. So when you're running a TFO or if you're doing any missions with friends, this is going to give you plus 2% bonus all damage. All damage types this is going to boost for a maximum of 10%. So that's basically if you're in a TFO with 5 other players, that would be maxing this out. Next, we have Operative. This is here for the plus 1 critical chance and plus 2 critical severity. This isn't a huge boost at all, but on the bonus level, or the budget level, there wasn't much else really to fit in here. So having that little extra, it all adds up. Next, we're using Bulkhead Technician. This is giving us a plus 10% to our hit points. So again, additional survivability. And then this ship it's not a boat, but it's definitely not an escort. So I went ahead and put Thrill Seeker on here to help us out with our flight speed and impulse speed, get us around the map a little bit more. It also, if we wanted to adjust, the speed setting, engine power down some and maybe put a little bit more into the auxiliary, that would help kind of offset that, at least for my play style and the way I like to fly the ship. All right, now all of our starship traits are going to come from the specialization system here. So when you fill out a specialization here, if you get halfway through, you're going to get a trait. Once you get all the way through it, you're going to get an improved version of that trait. And so what we're running our traits from, what are they from? They are from Command, Constable, Strategist, and also Commando. So we're running the 4 traits that come from that. And let's take a look at those here. So this is going to be, I believe, from Constable. And this is anytime we defeat a foe, our main target to ourselves, it's going to give us a 30% reduction on the recharge time for bridge officer abilities. This can only occur once every 30 seconds. Being that this is a beam overload build and we're focusing individual things, this really synergizes with this pretty well, as opposed to maybe a cannon scatter volley where you might be targeting one thing in particular, but maybe you're also hitting a whole bunch of other stuff. So you're still killing a lot of things, but somebody else may be killing that one that you're focusing on. So for beam overload, this is a nice free trait to use. Next, we are using improved unconventional tactics, and what this is doing is this is converting our, let's move that up out of the way. This is a captain's ability that all the different classes are going to have. It's Brace for Impact. Generally, you would use this to increase your hit points and some resistance for kinetic and torpedoes, but by slotting this trait, it turns it into also a clicky that will give you 20% bonus all damage for 15 seconds. This can be used on your psi, on whatever kind of build, because it does boost all damage. All damage types can be used. So this gives you a super duper poor man's, DPRM. It's going to give you a little bit of resistance, a little bit of healing, and a nice little boost for your bonus damage. So that's a nice one. It's probably the best one that you can get for free because it does affect, it's usable in pretty much any kind of a build. All right, moving on. This comes from, I believe, Commando. This is Improved Demolition Team. And essentially what this does is anytime that a target is close to you, it's going to start putting demolition teams on the target. If you get 3 of those demolition teams on the target, it's going to deal a fairly significant amount of kinetic damage. So in the instance that I have here, based on this overall build and my skills, 27,000 and some change kinetic damage. This is kind of we're using all free, so obviously if you had C-store stuff, there's a lot of things you could replace this with, but it's a little bit of extra damage, especially for larger bosses, things like that. They're going to be around a little bit longer, so as long as you're getting close to them, you'll be able to put these teams on. It does it automatically, so it's every 2 seconds it's going to do that to your target, or if you're the closest target to you, so within 2 kilometers essentially. All right, and then lastly, we have improved command frequency. And what this does is it allows us to use, and let's find it here. Here we go. Fleet Support 3. This is an ability that you get from, this is a captain's ability is what this is. And generally you can only use it when you are at 50% health or lower. By slotting this trait, it allows you to use it pretty much any time. It also reduces the cooldown quite a bit. When you click this, what happens is it's going to warp in a ship or 2 of your particular faction that's essentially going to be like a very large hangar pet for you. And they can do a pretty decent amount of damage. I think I was getting 4,000 or 5,000 DPS out of this at the end of an ISA. So it was around for about a minute or so and did a pretty significant amount of damage. And this allows us to use it in an instance that we choose as opposed to when we're starting to get our butts kicked. So if I'm not running this, I generally don't even have this on my bar. Take it for what it's worth, whether or not you'd want to slot it or not. But with this trait, you definitely want to slot it and then use it. I would save it, for large groups that are going to be around for a while, or enemies that are going to be around for a while. So large, dreadnoughts, things like that. That's where you're going to get the most out, because they do travel around a bit, but they're not going to go very far. So they're going to just engage in that close area where you spawn them. Okay, that covers our starship traits. Let's take a look at our space reputation traits. So pretty much same lineup I normally use for using advanced targeting systems. Yours, if you're new, are going to say targeting system. Advanced is when you complete the tier 6. So it's going to be, I think it's 2 less, so you'll be at 18%, 16 or 18%. Still a good chunk of boost to your critical severity. Next, we're using precision. This is giving us +5 critical chance. Which is very, very nice for using auxiliary power configuration offense. And this is scaling with our auxiliary, and it's giving us a bonus damage, all damage based off the auxiliary power. So if we cranked up the auxiliary power, we would see this bonus damage number go up. Next, we are using torpedo pre-fire sequence, and this is giving a very nice boost bonus damage to our torpedoes, 15.6%, and it is also giving us a fairly large boost of flight speed to destructible torpedoes. So some torpedoes, when you fire them in a high yield, they are going to move slow, they are targetable, they're almost like pets, except they obviously travel in a straight line or to their target and blow up, but there is opportunity for those to be targeted and blown up before they get there, and so them moving faster is going to reduce the amount of time that those are vulnerable. Next, we have Tyler's Duality, and this is giving us a very nice chunk to our critical chance. This is based off of our hit points that we have. You can max this out at 200,000 hit points, which would give you 7.5. Currently, with the hit points I have, we are getting 5.2 out of this. This is a little bit higher up on the tier. I think it's either 4 or 5 in the Discovery rep. If you don't have that unlocked yet, you could use the auxiliary configuration for offense, and that would give you some additional survivability instead of using Tyler's Duality. All right, let's take a look at the stations. So this is a Miracle / kind of a command ship. So it has all of the, the command system down here where you can attract fire and all the other commands there. It has some command seating. It's kind of garbage. There's not a lot that you can slot that's worth it in a command ensign slot specialization, and that's why I don't have any. If there was more, I would be using, I don't know, artillery or rally point or suppression barrage or concentrated firepower. I mean, there's a ton as soon as you get out of that, but in the instant slot, there's only like 3 or 4 different abilities, and none of them really brought any kind of benefit to this particular build. So I want to get that off, right away. The command side in terms of the seating on this ship is kind of a real bummer. So let's go start at the beginning here. So in the Universal Miracle Worker slot, I slotted Tactical in there. I needed that because I needed to be able to have a level 3 ability for my main firing mode, which is Beam Overload 3. Next, I went with narrow sensor bands, and I manually click this based on your distance. So you want to be within 4 kilometers or less, really, for it to work well. 6 is the max, but if you get into 3 or 4 kilometers, you're going to get the most out of it. This is going to give you a bonus energy weapon damage boost, and it's going to scale with how far away you are. So 35%, which is huge, to 15, which isn't terrible. So if you're cutting that in half or you're getting nice and close, this is a very, very nice clicky that you can use, and the cooldown on it is very quick. So you'll be able to use this very, very often. You'll just want to make sure that you're timing it out when you're close to the enemy. If you're at 8 kilometers, it's a wasted click and it's not going to do anything for you. And instant slot, we are using Torpedo Spread 1, since we have a torpedo up front. For our tactical station, we are using Tac Team 1, and we are using Attack Pattern Beta for the debuff. You could also use Omega in here. Can you do Omega in? I don't think you can. I don't think you can use Omega in Lieutenant Commander seat. I went with the debuff, so I would definitely recommend doing that. The Omega gets you moving around quick, and I can't remember off the top of my head, but I don't think you can fit that in this slot. Let me know down in the comments. I'll check after this as well. But all right, moving along here. Engineering seating. Jesus. We have emergency power to engines, and as always, I'm running the Con Officer. That also comes from the Phoenix packs. If you watch the Phoenix pack video again, I highlight that, and we'll take a look at it when we get to duty officers. But essentially, this is proccing that duty officer, and it's allowing me to cool down the evasive maneuvers much more quickly than you otherwise would. So if we were just to wait for it, I think it's a minute or 45 seconds. I have some other cooldowns going as well, but once that's on cooldown, so we're about 39 seconds, and we click emergency power to weapons, 2, 1, and it's ready to use again. Next, we are using Let It Go. I go over this as well in the winter event store review, my top picks. This comes from the winter event. If you are, following the guide and grinding out the ornaments, you're going to have plenty of ornaments to get all these different things. This is great filler to put in places. This is a pretty good ability here. It does some cold damage, which is basically next to nothing. The real value here is going to be the debuff, so it's 6.3 all damage resistance rating for every second for 20 seconds, stacks up to 20 times. So this turns into a huge amount of debuff. So if you put this down on a large target and it's staying alive for 4, 5, 6, 10, 15 seconds, it's not going to last much longer after that with that amount of damage resistance debuff on it. Great ability. Definitely pick that up from the Winter Event store if you haven't. All right, next we are using emergency powered weapons. This is a energy weapons build. So when you're putting together a build, if you need to have, if it's an energy weapons build, cannon or beam, you need to have the highest version of that firing mode that you choose to use. That's your number one priority. Your second number one priority is going to be boosting that weapon's power. So that's going to be emergency power to weapons. If this only had, lieutenant commander seating, or I'm sorry, a lieutenant seating, then I would have emergency power to weapons too. So that needs to be, your priorities, third being your cooldown. So here, Photonic Officer is my cooldown, and I use the highest rank on it that I can get. We'll get to that here in a moment. Lastly, I am using reverse shield polarity. This is for additional survivability. If we're having problems, we click this, and this does a very good job at mitigating that incoming damage. All of these you can get from the vendor, except for the one that I mentioned from the Winter Event store. And then for reverse shield polarity, I'm using rank 3. So you would have to craft this, or you can get it off the exchange for extremely cheap. Basically sell one patrol run worth of loot, and you would be able to pick that up. They're very inexpensive. All right, for our last station here, Science Station, we are using hazard emitters. I have hazard emitters down on my spam bar here because this buffs one of our specializations, and that's going to be strategist. Anytime we do a heal, that is going to boost our critical chance. So let's go ahead and click that so we can see here. So at 43% with our cooldowns, this has a very, very short, relatively speaking, cooldown. And so we're able to keep that up fairly often and get that extra critical chance out of it. That is why we're running it. Not to mention a heal over time never hurts. Next, Very Cold in Space. This is another Winter Event ability. This is, again, another good filler. This creates an effect called, what is it? Something Onic Turbulence. Now I can't even think of it. I just had it. This actually parsed pretty well on the 2 ISAs that I did. I think one of them it did, just under 3,000, and another one it did almost 4. Ionic Turbulence, I think. Cryonic turbulence, something like that. Anyways, it does basically an area of effect, and it slows the enemy, causes cold damage, and this does quite a bit of cold damage compared to Let It Go. Again, I use it as filler. I didn't have anything better to put here, and I'll even use this as filler on high-end builds and in-game builds, those kinds of things as well. So this is another one. These are the 2 that I really recommend picking up, and you can get them in any rank. I'll use them on any rank that I need to fill in a gap. Generally, that's this lieutenant slot. All right, lastly on our stations, we have Photonic Officer, and this is here for the cooldowns. So this, when we click it, is going to give us a reduction on our bridge officer abilities of 3% every second for 20 seconds. So that adds up fairly quick without having improved Photonic Officer or anything else to extend, say, our firing modes. I can't keep things up 100% of the time, but we're only looking in most cases at maybe having 5 seconds down here and there on especially like our main firing modes. So you definitely need to have some cooldown. The most budget-friendly way to do cooldown is going to be Photonic Officer. If this only had a Lieutenant Science seating, I would have Photonic Officer 1. So remember your priorities. You want to have firing mode, whatever it is that you're building towards, max as you can, feed as much power as you can to those weapons, and then cooldown. And those are the things that should take precedence in each of these different classes in any of your builds, regardless of what you're working towards. All right, so that covers the basics on the build. Let's just take a peek at the duty officers. There's not a lot in here. I have Boimler's. I don't even know if he's really even doing anything. Is he on projectiles? He does a toxic cloud. I don't even think it showed up in my parse. Torpedo hits, 20% chance to create a waste cloud, essentially, that does some damage. I did not even see that on the parse that I did. I could take him off and we wouldn't even know. I have Lar on here. He comes from a mission drop in the Nimbus arc. He's allowing our torpedoes to reload potentially a little bit faster. Again, I don't know that I would notice a massive difference if I took him off, but we are getting a little something out of it. And so every little bit adds up, when you're putting these builds together, especially on this level. And then lastly, we have the con officer that I had alluded to earlier. He is allowing the the evasive maneuvers to cool down faster while using emergency power to engines. And again, that is going to come from the Phoenix store. This is generally the first thing that I buy. Like when I level a new character or something like that, you can get it with a very rare, which you're going to get lots of those dropping for you during this free event. And he's going to be here. If you're a Klingon or a different faction, he'll have a different picture, but the description will be the same. You'll want to pick him up and slot him as soon as you can if you enjoy getting around the map quickly. All right, so that covers our duty officers. What else do we need to look at? Let's just take a look at the endeavors just so we know where I'm coming from here. So I'm not real far. If you're brand new, I'm obviously farther than you, but this goes up to like 500 or 600. So I'm not very far on it, although I have focused on the things that are most important to me, and we're getting some decent little boost out of this. So just so we can see at least where the top stuff is there. All right, let's go ahead and let's jump into some combat and just take a look at how the ship does. All right, here we are in a Wanted Advanced. So this is set on Advanced mode. And let's see how this ship does. So I am using a spam bar. It's my number 7 and 8. I have my Kobayashi Maru on that. The ship doesn't handle terrible. I don't find that it slides really bad, but I also don't get it going very fast. So I do wish it leaned a little bit more. That's more of just, an aesthetic kind of thing. It leans a bit. It's not bad, but especially when you go really... If you have a build on this where it moves much quicker, it kind of starts to look a little weird to me. It already kind of looks like a robot that's moving really fast, like one of those ones that are flying around there on Discovery. The Sphere Data AI has taken over. See if we can get some ionic turbulence here. It's not ionic turbulence. I don't know why I keep calling it. We're going to look at that on the parse after. So this is a side character. This was the first character that I started developing on my free-to-play account. If I could do it all over again, they would mostly all be tactical, with the exception of maybe something I'm going to do specific for Psy. But even in that instance, the captain's abilities on the side characters are just so good. Or I'm sorry, on the tactical characters are so good. The abilities on the Psy, I think, are probably next scattering filled. There's also a debuff here with sensor scan. So I would say Psy engineers, unfortunately, at the moment are kind of in a bad place. You can build around them and do pretty well. But I would definitely recommend going tactical. If you do plan on doing Psy in the future, you could go Psy, but you can do Psy with a tactical as well. So it just... They're identical with the exception of those captain's abilities. So that is my recommendation for that. It has nothing to do with this video, but we got to fill some time here while we're killing Hirogen. So Photonic Officer takes, 40 seconds to recharge, but it only runs for 20. So we do have some downtime there, or it runs for 20, and 30 seconds to recharge. But even with that going, abilities tend to be up pretty quick. I mean, I almost have narrow sensor bands back up again, which we're going to maybe use on this guy. No, he's going to be dead. So, I mean, the ship is probably over-tanked. So, like in your personal space traits, if you have any premium ones or any ones that are more damage-oriented, I would probably drop... like the tech one that gives you more hit points. I mean, we're in advance on a 100% free-to-play build on a free ship they gave us, and I mean, I haven't even thought twice about dying. That's not in my mind. I'm not worried about it whatsoever, which means we have a lot of room to add, additional damage output. Let's turn on our command ability here for weapons. Make sure you do that with these commander commands you can use. So use the weapon synergy efficiency. This is going to reduce your weapon's power cost by quite a bit. Fortunately, I forgot to do that at the very beginning. All right, here we go in for the last group. I'm going to wait a couple seconds for some of my abilities to come up. I'm also going to launch all of our fleet stuff here. I don't know why they all just grayed out. Oh, I got to be in combat, that's why. All right, here we go. Let's bring the fleet in. Oh, so that does put it on cooldown. Okay, that's okay. So we have some matching ships. One is the Photonic Fleet, which is one of the science captain's abilities, and then we have our other one that's not flashing like a hologram, and that is from our fleet support. And they do a decent amount of damage, especially their torpedo spreads do really, really well. So I got a total of, what, 3 of them in here. They're Jem'Hadar because this is actually a Jem'Hadar character. So if you were Romulan, you would have, you know, warbirds that would come in, or, you know, if you were Fed, I'm not even sure which one the Feds have. Let me know on that. I don't think I'm sure I've used it on a Fed character, I just can't remember. All right. Well, I mean, like I said, for a free ship and a 100% free-to-play build, that advanced patrol didn't even phase us. I mean, we pretty much mowed through everything with no problem whatsoever. Dying wasn't even an issue or a concern or a thought, pre-thought, afterthought, none of it. Part of it's the ship's pretty tanky ship. Like I said, if you had some premium traits like History Will Remember and Honor Dead or anything like that, you could put a tank build together on this and do fine. Even in elite content, you would be fine with that, doing an aggro tank or something like that. So there's a lot of room to improve on this. This just gives us a good baseline of kind of where we can start building something that's effective, with parts that we can just either easily craft or get from systems early on in the game, like the rep system or your fleet. You can get that stuff very early on once you max level a character, or mission drops, which you're going to just pick up along the way anyways as you're playing through the game. I think this is an extremely effective build. It's a great place to start, and then from here you can start to improve on that. If you get box weapons or you get additional traits, or you did the year-long events and you're going to spend it on lobby and you can pick up lobby items and things like that, you can just expand out from this place. But I think this is a good spot to start for a DPS oriented build on this particular ship. I'm really happy with the performance of this and the way that this build turned out and performed. All right, guys. Well, I think that takes care of it. I think that's everything for now for this particular build. I may do a tank build on it. If I do a tank build, though, it's not going to be a free-to-play build. It's just not really possible to do an effective one without having some of those traits that I had mentioned. So we'll see what happens there. I will have the builds coming out for the refits that we had the poll on. So that poll wasn't for which one I was going to do. It was actually for which one I was going to do first. I'm going to do all 3 of those. Those will be coming here in the next couple weeks. I think that is everything I need to cover. If this video was helpful, please consider hitting the sub button. That helps me out. Thumbs up. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what you thought about the build, what kind of stuff you're doing on your builds. I always appreciate that. And I think this will be the last video of 2021. So here's to 2022. Hopefully it's better for everybody. I hope everybody had a good holiday season, was safe, and yeah, I think that takes care of it, guys. All right, until next time, as always, thank you very, very much for watching. I appreciate all of you, and have a good one.